There's a wooden box sitting in my chicken run. 4 boards, a handful of screws, and a piece of wire off a roll that's been in the barn longer than I have.
It's been feeding my hens since April. Right now, there are 6 birds stood along the edge of it with their heads down, and the green inside is thicker than it was a week ago. They eat it, and it grows back. Every week, all season. I'll have you building one before this video is 3 minutes old. But I want to be straight with you from the start.
That feed sack in my shed is staying right where it is.
There's still a paper sack of feed in the corner of my shed. There always will be. And once I've shown you the box, I'm going to tell you why. Because that's where this old Scottish method actually begins. The box is only the part of it you can see. Start with the problem. Because if you've kept hens in a run, you've lived it. You throw down grass seed. Maybe you plant a patch of greens in the corner, feeling clever about it. It comes up.
That bare ground isn't bad luck. Watch your feet, and you'll see why.
It looks wonderful for about a day and a half. Then you walk out one morning and there's bare dirt, and 11 hens looking at you like you owe them something. Watch the feet. That's the whole answer, right there. A hen doesn't graze. A sheep grazes, takes the top off, moves on. A hen excavates. Those 3 toes go back, 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 and she eats what comes up, and what comes up is the root. She isn't eating your greens, she's mining them. So you don't try to stop her scratching. You can't. You put something between her feet and those roots. Here's the box. 4 boards on edge, about 6 inches deep. Mine's 4 feet by 2, made out of old decking that was leaning behind the shed. Screw them into a rectangle, no bottom. It sits straight on the ground. Fill it with soil. Molehill dirt, a wheelbarrow of whatever came out of the garden, it doesn't matter. Then sow it 3 or 4 times.
Everything so far is simple. This next detail makes the box work.
Thicker than you'd ever sow a garden bed. You're not growing plants here. You're growing a mat. Oats, barley, clover, a bit of kale, whatever coarse green seed you've got kicking around. And now the part that decides whether this works, or whether you've built a very handsome raised bed for your hens to destroy. The lid. A sheet of wire mesh over the top, holes about 1 inch across, fastened down all the way around. Not chicken wire, that's too floppy and the holes are wrong. You want something stiff enough to stand on. 1 inch is the whole trick. Big enough for a hen to put her head through and take the tops off. Too small for a foot. The green grows up through the wire. The birds crop whatever comes through, they walk around on top of it, and they never once get at the crown, so it grows back at them, again and again. 3 things I'd tell a neighbor building his first one. Hinge the lid, because you'll want to re-sow in them.
The frame is simple. The harder question is why I still buy feed.
Month, and you won't want to back out screws in the rain. Run 2 thin strips of wood under the mesh so it sits 1 inch above the soil. Hens are heavier than they look, and if that mesh lies flat, they'll pack the dirt down like a footpath. And build 2, so you can let them at one while the other comes on. Give a new one 10 days before you open it. That's the box. That's the picture on the front of this video, and now you can build one. So why is there still a sack of feed in my shed? Because of something you can work out on the back of an envelope, and almost nobody does. A laying hen eats about 1/4 pound of feed a day. Doesn't sound like much. 10 hens will go through a 50-pound sack in about 3 weeks. Now go and pick a handful of anything green. Nettle, kale, chickweed, doesn't matter. Feel the weight of it. Most of what's in your hand is water. So to replace 1 single day of that sack, 1 day, your hen would have to put away well over 1 pound of wet leaf. Every day. Through a crop about the size of a plum. She can't. You can lead a hen to a salad bar. You cannot make her eat a wheelbarrow. People who've actually measured it figure a bird on decent ground picks up somewhere between 5 and 20% of what she needs by foraging. That's not nothing.
The old method wasn't about free food. It was about having more than one option.
It isn't a sack, either. So here's the honest version. That box will not replace a bag of layer feed. Nothing green will. But the old Scots who did all this never thought it would. They weren't trying to replace a bag. They didn't have a bag. Nobody was hauling pellets 200 miles in the back of a truck. They had a hen, a patch of rough ground, and 12 months to get through. And every one of those months asked for something different. That's what this method actually is. It was never about replacing nutrition with weeds. It was about replacing dependence. The box is one piece of it, the visible piece. There are two more, and between them, they're worth more than the box. The first one costs nothing at all, and it isn't a plant. Before you go hunting for free feed, stop losing the feed you've already paid for. Go stand in your coop. Look down. Push the bedding around with your boot, near the feeder. See that? All that dusty crumb worked down into the shavings? That isn't dirt. That's money. Here's why. A hen doesn't pick her feet up neatly. She drives her beak in and flicks sideways. That's a foraging move. It's hardwired, and she'll do it to a feed pan exactly the way she'd do it to leaf litter. Two fixes, both free. Raise the feeder. Get the lip of it level.
There's one more cheap fix. It sounds odd, but start by wetting the ration.
With the bird's back. She can reach in comfortably. She can't stand over it and shovel. And use something with a lip that turns inward, so what she flicks hits the return and drops back in instead of out. If you're feeding from an open pan on the floor, you're feeding the bedding. Second thing, go look at the bottom corner of your feed sack. If there's a neat round hole in it, you're not feeding 6 hens. You're feeding 6 hens and whatever comes in after dark. They work every night, all winter, and they never miss a shift. A metal bin with a lid ends that conversation. One more, and people are shy of this one because it looks like witchcraft. Wet your feed. Put the day.
Those fixes work today. The next lesson takes us back a few hundred years.
Day's ration in a bucket. Cover it with water. Leave it a day. Feed it as a mash. It sours a little, the way milk does. Sour and yeasty is right. Fuzzy and gray means tip it out and start over. There's decent research behind it. Hens on fermented feed have shown better feed conversion, which in plain language means a bit more out of the same feed. But that's not why I do it. Wet mash can't be flicked. It sticks together, so she can't fling it into the bedding. Some of that saving is just physics. None of that is clever. It's a bucket, a bin, and a feeder hung 6 inches higher. But do those 3, and the sack in the corner lasts noticeably longer, and you haven't planted a seed yet. That's the door you can shut this afternoon. The next one takes a year, and it's the one your great-grandmother would have recognized. Picture a low stone cottage somewhere in Scotland, 200 or 300 years ago. Wind coming off the hill, nothing much growing anywhere. And right behind the back door, inside a wall or a thick hedge, a small...
What mattered wasn't summer abundance. It was having something useful when winter came.
Patch of ground with green things still standing in it in the middle of winter. Every cottage had one. Laird or cotar, rich or poor, everybody. It had a name, the Kailyard. And the definition that survives from the early 1800s is almost comically plain. A small enclosure for planting kale and raising roots. 2 details in that are worth more than they look. The wall wasn't decoration. The wall was the point. It was there to keep the livestock out of the greens, which, if you've been paying attention, is the same idea as an inch of wire mesh over a wooden box. Same problem, same answer, 400 years apart. And the second detail. They cut from that patch from November right through to June, through the winter. That's the whole thing in one line. Those people weren't growing a summer garden. They were growing a year. That's the shift I want you to make. Not a list of plants. A calendar. A hen doesn't want the same.
They'll eat it now, but there's a better nettle trick, and I'm saving that one.
Same thing in April that she wants in November, and the plant that saves you in February is no use to you in July. So let's walk a year. Spring. She's laying hardest, and an egg is mostly protein and water. Which brings me to the plant this whole video is really about. There's a bank of nettles behind my old stone shed. Nobody planted it. Nobody waters it. It was there before me, and it'll be there after. Most folks spend an afternoon a year.
That's laboratory nutrition, not backyard magic. Larvae help, but they don't replace a balanced ration.
Trying to kill theirs. Depending on when you cut it, somewhere between 1/5 and 1/3 of a nettle's dry weight is protein. That is not a garden weed. That's the expensive end of what you're paying for in that sack, growing in the one corner of your ground you've never used for anything. Now, a hen won't touch a nettle standing up. She's no fool. So you cut it and leave it lying in a heap. Come back the next morning and the sting's gone out of it, the leaf's gone soft and dark, and they'll clean it up off the ground like it was a treat. That's the easy way. There's a better way, and I'm saving it for the end, because it's the most useful thing I know about feeding hens, and it deserves a few minutes to itself. Summer is the easy season, and it's when the box earns its keep. Steady green in front of birds who'd otherwise stand on bare dirt all day. And if you've got lamb's quarters coming up in the garden, that tall, dusty weed with a white bloom under the young leaves, pull it up and throw it in whole. The old Scots name for it is fat hen, and they didn't pick that name for nothing. Autumn is where people get caught out. Your birds quit laying. You assume they're finished, or lazy, or past it. Then you look properly at the run, and there are feathers everywhere. She's molting. She's building an entire new coat, and a feather is very nearly pure protein. That is the most expensive month of her year, and almost nobody feeds for it. Green leaf on its own will not carry a bird through a molt. Hold on to that, because it's coming back. Then the dark months, which are a different job altogether. Go out in January and look at bare ground, the wet patch by the gate, the edge of a garden bed. Somewhere in there you'll find a low mat of small, pale leaves with tiny white star flowers, looking fresh and completely out of season. Chickweed. Everything around it is dead, and this thing is thriving. That's the entire reason it's here. It comes up in autumn, sits green under frost, and it's still going in the dead month, which is exactly when your yolks go the color of a paper bag. A double handful in February is worth a barrow load in June. And then kale, the Kailyard plant. Here's a thing that surprises people. A kale leaf is sweeter in February than it was in October. The plant turns its own starch into sugar to keep from freezing solid. Frost improves it. The birds work that out before you do. But how you feed it matters more than the kale does. Don't pick the leaves and scatter them on the ground. They'll be trampled and fouled inside 10 minutes. Hang the whole stalk on a bit of string, about the height of a hen's head. Now watch. She stretches up, gets hold of it, and the thing swings away from her. She goes after it again. Another bird comes in from the far side. That stalk gets stripped to the ribs, and it'll keep a whole flock busy the better part of an hour on a February afternoon. That hour is worth more than the feed is. A bored hen in a dark month starts pulling feathers out of the bird in front of her, and once that starts in a flock, it spreads, and it's very hard to stop. A kale stalk on a string is the cheapest cure for it there is. Comfrey, I'll mention, and then I'll be honest about it. Deep taproot pulls minerals up out of subsoil nothing else reaches, and hens will eat the leaves wilted. Good stuff, in small amounts. But there's a story going round that you can feed it by the barrow load, and I wouldn't. Comfrey carries compounds that are hard on a liver. A trial feeding dried comfrey leaf to chickens found no damage at modest levels, which is reassuring. But work on other plants in that family has found those compounds turning up in the eggs, in the yolk particularly. So my caution here isn't really about the hen. It's about the yolk.
Protein gets attention, but calcium is the gap that can quietly cost a hen.
On my plate on Sunday. A few leaves a week, wilted a day, chopped. Not a bulk feed. Which brings us back to the molt, and the two things green leaf will never do for you, no matter how much you grow. The first is protein. Real, concentrated protein. That's what you're actually buying in that sack. Not the color, not the bulk, the protein. The old answer was a bucket with holes punched in the bottom, hung over the run, and nature left to sort out the details. It isn't a delicate business, and I'll leave the description there. The modern version is a black soldier fly bin, and if you've got warm months, it works. Kitchen waste and spoiled fruit go in one end, larvae come out the other, and hens lose their minds over them. The research is genuinely impressive. In properly balanced rations, larvae meal at around 10% has replaced soybean meal completely with no drop in laying. But read that carefully. That's a weighed, formulated diet in a controlled trial. In your own backyard, a bucket of larvae is not a bag of feed. It's a summer patch on the one hole your greens can't fill. It's free. And in September, when your birds are growing a whole new coat, it's worth more than everything green you've got. The second gap is the one I really want you to hear, because it quietly damages birds. That shell was built while you were asleep. Every egg takes about 2 grams of calcium out of your hen. To keep that up, she needs 4 or 5 grams a day going in, and the shell itself goes on overnight, hours after she stopped eating. She does carry a reserve in her bones. It's about 1 gram, and she can only draw on a fraction of it in a day. So if calcium isn't coming in through the beak, it comes out of her skeleton. Thin shells first. Then a bird that goes downhill and you can't quite say why. No leaf fixes that. Not nettle, not comfrey, not the finest box you ever built. What does fix it costs nothing. Oyster shell, or your own eggshells, dried and crushed. Put it in a separate dish, leave it there, keep it topped up. Don't mix it through the feed. She'll take what she needs and leave the rest. They're remarkably good at knowing. And while we're here, grit is not calcium. Grit is her teeth. Calcium is building material. Two different jobs, and a bird needs both. And one quick thing, because somebody always asks about sprouting grain.
Old-timers kept doing this for a reason. Modern research eventually measured part of it.
A pound of grain does not become 6 pounds of feed. It becomes a pound of feed and 5 pounds of water. Sprout a tray for winter green if you like. Just don't sprout expecting to multiply anything. Now the thing I promised you. June. Nettles up past your knees, before they flower, while the stems are still soft. Gloves, shears, and a ball of string. That's the whole equipment list. Cut them and tie them in bundles about as thick as your wrist. Stems together. Loose. And I mean loose. A tight bundle goes moldy in the middle where you can't see it, and mold is the one thing you never want near a hen. If a bundle comes down smelling like a cellar, it goes on the fire, not in the sack. Hang them upside down somewhere, dry with air moving through. A shed rafter is perfect, out of the sun. Both of those have reasons. Upside down. Because whatever goodness is in the stem runs down into the leaf as it dries.
Don't miss the larger point. That feed sack was never the enemy.
And the leaf is the part you're keeping. Out of the sun. Because sunlight bleaches it, and the first thing sunlight takes is exactly the thing you're doing this for. 3 weeks. Maybe 4. The leaf goes crisp. Strip it off the stems into a paper sack and crush it in your hands until it's a coarse green crumb. Stems on the fire. Sack on a shelf. And you forget about it. That's nettle hay. Hardly anyone does it now. Everybody used to. And here's the part I find quietly satisfying. Somebody eventually went and tested it properly. Dried nettle leaf, fed to laying hens as a small part of the ration. 2.5%, 5%. The carotenoid in those yolks went up more than 6-fold. Egg production, unchanged. The birds laid exactly as they had before, and the yolks came out a different color. My grandmother never read that. She didn't need to. She knew June was when you cut. Because this is what it's for. It's a black morning in December. Frost on the gate. 7:30 and barely light. Everybody around here is complaining their hens have quit and their yolks have gone pale. You take 2 handfuls of that green crumb out of the paper sack, stir it through a warm mash, and carry it across the yard with the steam coming off it. And the birds come at a run. She wasn't making free feed. She was putting the summer in a sack and opening it in December. That's the method. Not one trick. A year, handled in the right order. I'll say the wider thing, because it's why I bother with any of this. The sack in my shed isn't the enemy. Modern feed is one of the best things that ever happened to keeping hens. It's consistent, it's balanced, and it put a few birds in the backyards of people who'd never have managed otherwise. I'll keep buying it. But somewhere across 2 generations, we went from a household where a woman could walk out her back door, name every green thing that would feed her birds and tell you which month each one was for, to a shelf of paper sacks with a picture of a hen on the front and no idea what else is out there. That's the bit that got lost. Not the sack. The choice. So here's what I'd do this week. 3 things. Build the box. 4 boards, soil, seed sown thick, wire over the top, and leave it 10 days before you let them near it. The wire is the whole trick. Then go and look at your feeder and your feed bin. Raise the one, seal the other, and weigh your scoop once while you're at it so you actually know what you're using. And cut 1 bundle of nettles. Tie the stems, hang it upside down somewhere dry, and forget about it until Christmas. Tell me in the comments what's growing wild on your ground, and what you call it where you are. Next time, the molt, and how to feed a bird building herself a whole new coat. Build the box, fix the feeder, hang the nettles.